Hi, today I'll be coding a tree, stating the obvious here. This tree is going to have a number of levels along the y-axis, and for each of these levels, a number of faces around the y-axis. These faces are going to be triangular for the levels of the crown, which are stacked pyramids, and rectangular for the base level, which is a prism. Let's get started with the code. We already have the number of faces per level and the number of levels, so let's get the total number of faces. This is going to be n equal to the number of faces per level times the number of levels. Okay, and once we have this, we're going to use it in a loop here. So for let I going from 0 all the way up to n, increment this I at every step and generate a face. Next up, dimensions. We're going to use some dummy ones for now, just to put something on the screen. Don't think about it too much. So something like this, pretty random. Give it a background just so that we can see stuff, and a box shadow. I'm not really sure if I should set this, but I just want to show you the edges, the limits of everything. So we're going to clip now everything to triangles. Of course, later on we're going to ensure that the base faces are going to stay rectangles and they're not going to get transformed into triangles, but for now let's just clip everything to triangles. So we're going to have clip path, polygon, and the vertices of this polygon are going to be, first one is going to be in the middle of this top edge right here, so 50% horizontally, 0 vertically. Second one is going to be this corner, 100% horizontally, 100% vertically. Third one is going to be this corner, 0% horizontally, 100% vertically. So 50%, 0, 100%, 100%, 0, 100%. Okay, now having done this, we have those triangles. Let's move on to layout, and just like in the previous videos, we're going to set both on the body and on all div elements display grid. So display grid like that, and again, like in previous videos, we're going to make all these faces overlap in the cell at the intersection between the first row and first column. So that's going to be grid area, first row, first column. Next up, we're going to copy paste, because copy paste makes the world go round. So we're going to have that tree element. So place self, center, and you see this only places our triangle in the middle horizontally, and that's because the body takes the height of its content. So we need to explicitly set the height of the body. So body height, full viewport height. And of course, this is going to generate a scroll bar. Let's get rid of it, margin 0. And just in case, overflow hidden. Okay, something else we're going to want to set before I forget, perspective, 35 ems. And this is to ensure that everything that's closer to us appears bigger and everything that's further away appears smaller. So that's what perspective is for. Next step is going to be to distribute this stuff in 3D. But before we do that, we're going to want to set some things here and as custom properties, and so you can pass them to the CSS. So in a style element, we're going to have a loop, and actually I'm just going to comment this before I finish writing it, because I've had issues with CodePen stopping working as I do this stuff, and it's super annoying, so I don't want to happen again. So face, nth child, and of course, as I said, that's going to be n faces. So every n faces plus I plus 1, and it's plus 1 here because the index of nth child is 1 based as opposed to that of the loop, which is 0 based. And here we're going to have an index around the y-axis, and this is going to be j, and this is going to be set to the loop index. And here we're also going to have in the style attribute, okay, we're going to have number of faces. For the CSS we want a dash, not that. Okay, so having set all this stuff, and of course we need to uncomment it, hopefully nothing breaks now. Okay, everything still looks fine. We can move on here, and we're going to have a progress around the y-axis, and that's going to be calc j over the number of faces. So having done this, we can set a transform Okay, and this is going to be, first off, is going to be a rotate y, and this is going to be calc that progress p times 1 turn. Okay, next step is going to be translate along the third axis, and again we're going to use something like a random value. Don't think about it too much, it's just something pretty random, and we're going to change it later. Okay, next step, we're going to have a rotation around the y-axis, around the x-axis, sorry, and we want this axis to be along the base. By default it goes through the middle, and we want to move it down, and we want the origin to be in the middle of the base edge. So that's going to mean at 50% horizontally and 100% vertically. So transform origin 50% horizontally, 100% vertically. And now we're going to have a rotate x, and I don't even know, something random. Okay, I suppose that's a bit too big for some reason. Yeah, that's pretty silly, and I'm not going to. Let's make this green because it's going to be a bit more visible otherwise. So something like that. Let's get rid of this because it doesn't serve any purpose anymore. Let's also set opacity 0.1 so that it becomes a bit more visible how stuff is. So you can kind of see the pyramid now. But let's look at the diagram of it. First off, let me show you what we need to compute. We're going to need to compute the width of the base edge. We're going to need to compute the height of the lateral face. So this edge right here is going to be both the edge of the base polygon and both the base of the lateral face, okay? And that's that width that we set for the lateral face. We're going to need to compute the height of a lateral face. We're going to compute this translation value from the center of the pyramid and onto the edge, and this x rotation, okay? So let's get here. So as you can see, we're going to need to compute this BC value, which is both the base of this lateral face and an edge of the base polygon. We're going to need to compute this AD segment, which is the height of the lateral face. We're going to need to compute this OD segment, which is the translation value, and it's also the in radius. And let me show you what I mean by in radius. So we have a polygon, and the in radius is the radius of the in circle, which is this circle that tightly fits inside the polygon and touches every face of the polygon, and it touches it exactly in the middle, and this radius is perpendicular onto the edge, okay? So this radius is what we're going to need to compute. That's going to be our OD value. And we're also going to want this angle between the lateral face and the vertical, which is basically the angle with the height of the pyramid, because the height of the pyramid is vertical, right? So it's going to be the angle between AD and AO, so the DAO angle. So that's what we want. Now, if you know me, you know I like nice round numbers. So I'm going to pick the values here just so that I can have nice round numbers. So I'm going to pick 30 degrees for the DAO angle, and I'm picking that because sine of 30 degrees is 0.5. That's 1 over 2, which means that 1 over sine of 30 degrees is 2. And what this means in this triangle is that since OD over AD is the sinus of our angle, which we said we're going to pick to be 30 degrees, then OD over AD is 1 over 2. So AD is twice OD. That's the whole thing. So this OD, as I said, is going to be the inner radius. So let's set those values right here. So we're going to have that rotation angle 30 in degrees, and the radian value is going to be this value times pi over 180. Okay, then we're going to have the relative inner radius, which is going to be, let's say, 18. And then we're going to compute the relative face height, which we said is going to be this relative in radius over the sine of the radian value. Right, and then we're going to want to have the relative face width. And as you can see, the relative face width is going to be that BC. So, right here, let's get this out and let me show you another circle. This is going to be the circumcircle, and it's the circle on which all the vertices of our polygon are situated. Now, the angle between this radius and this radius is the angle corresponding to one edge. And it's going to be, if all the edges are equal, then all these angles are going to be equal. And the edges are all equal in our case. So this angle is going to be 360 degrees over the number of edges, which is equal to the number of lateral faces of the pyramid. So this is going to be 360 degrees over the number of faces, or 2 pi over the number of faces. Now, if we also have this, then this angle between the circumradius and the in radius is half that base angle we just computed. Okay, so it's going to be half of 360 over the number of faces. And we already know this relative in radius, so we can compute half of the edge. So half of the edge is basically going to be this in radius times the tangent. Okay, so the whole edge is going to be twice half the edge. So let's put that into code. So twice the relative in radius times the tangent of half the base angle. And the base angle we said is 360 degrees over the number of faces, or 2 pi over the number of faces. And of course 0.5 times 2 is 1, so that's basically just pi over the number of faces. Now, having done this, we're going to set these as custom properties to pass them to the CSS. Right, and relative in radius and we're going to have relative face width, and actually for these last two is going to be relative face height. So now that we have these values, we're going to decide upon a unit. So we're going to have unit here, something, if I can type it. Anyway, so here we'll be having, it's going to be a calc, and here as well. So that's going to be calc, relative face width times that unit. Of course, this is going to be a relative face height, relative in radius. This is going to be that AX angle. Okay, so this is starting to look like something. Yay! Now, the next step is going to be to position them vertically, because we want them stack, not overlapping the pyramids. So for that, we're going to need to pass a few more things from here into the CSS. So we're just going to double on that loop, and here we're going to have levels. We're going to take the number of faces from there, and it's going to be multiplied with I here, and here we're going to have another custom property set to the loop index. And of course here we're also going to have to set the number of levels, right? So this is going to be so having done this now, we're going to set this right here to calc. So the number of levels minus the current level index. Okay, so something like this. Let's make this higher, because everything looks almost transparent now. Okay, now the next step here is we're going to want to set a margin bottom of sorts. That's going to be something like a calc minus 0.85 times the unit. So basically something like this, and they end up being stacked somehow, which is good. Now let's differentiate between the crown and the base. So we're going to have here a crown flag, and this is going to be the minimum between 1 and the level index. Now for the base level, this level index is going to be 0. So the minimum is going to be 0. For the other levels, this I is going to be 1, 2, 3, and so on. And the minimum between 1 and 1, 2, 3, and so on is always going to be 1. So the crown levels are going to have this value 1, and the base level is going to have this value 0. Okay? So then we're going to have not crown, right? This is going to be calc 1 minus the crown. Okay, and of course I can't spell that thing right. So we're only going to want to have this rotation around the x-axis for the crown levels. So put this inside the calc. And of course we're going to have something very similar right here, right? So put that inside the calc. So it's going to be 0% for the base level, because this crown flag is 0, and 50% for the crown levels, because this flag is 1. Now here, replace this as well. So with 100% minus. And of course, this is going to be 0, and yeah. Okay, so we have those. It's kind of hard to see right now. We're going to set a factor here. This is going to be, for example, calc, and we're going to have for not crown, we're going to have a base multiplier. So let's set this base multiplier, something like this. And for the crown levels, we're just going to leave them all at 1 for now. We're going to change that soon, but for now, let's just leave them all at 1. Now here, we're going to have a unit. So this unit is going to be this factor times, okay, so we're going to use that instead, and we're going to use that in the margin and pretty much everywhere. Okay, and of course this is going to be strictly for the crown, that margin bottom. Okay, that's too big of an opacity, because you can't, now you can see the base level there. Oh, and of course we're going to need to use that there. Okay, so I suppose that should have happened. So that's what I did wrong there. Okay, so now you see that the base is not middle aligned horizontally anymore, so we need to fix that. So we're going to have justify self. Yeah, it has to justify itself. Center. Okay, now having done this, okay, we don't want this margin on the first crown level from the bottom, right? And of course, we're going to want this to be more something like 1 minus that b value minus 1. And we're not going to want to have this margin on the first crown level from the bottom. So this means that we're going to need to multiply this with a minimum between 1 and calc of level index minus 1. So if the level index is 1, which is the case for the first level from the bottom, then this is going to be 0, and the minimum is going to be 0, so the whole margin bottom is going to be 0. And for the other levels above, this is going to be 1, so yeah, the margin is going to be non-zero. Let's bump up the opacity again, and let's make the base a different color. But first, I think we can compute a crown progress, and this is going to be something like calc. And of course, we want this crown progress to be, so we want this crown progress to be a 0 for the first crown level and 1 for the top crown level. So that's going to be, we're going to have basically I minus 1. So because the first crown level from the bottom has level index 1, so if we have 1 minus 1, this is going to give us 0. And this is going to be over the number of levels minus 2. So it's going to be minus 1, so we can have 1 for all the levels, but we need to exclude the base level, so that's going to be an additional minus 1. And then we're going to have a complementary of this. So the complementary of this is going to be 1 minus the crown progress. So now that we have this, we can multiply here with 1 minus that crown progress, minus 0.5. Okay, so you can see things are starting to look better. Okay, now let's put different colors between the base and the crown, right? So we're going to have a list of RGBs, empty initially. Now, next step, we're going to get the length of this list. So we're going to have n length of the color list, and then we're going to have a loop. So for I from 0 all the way up to n, get the current color, and this is going to be nth I plus 1. And this is because, again, nth index is 1 based, and that loop index is 0 based, so that's the whole thing. Now, to the RGBs list, we're going to append RGBs, and then we're going to append a list, and that's going to be red of the current color, and similar for the other two channels. It's going to be green and blue. So now that we have this, we're going to have a function get RGB component, and we're going to have the component index, and we're going to have return. This is going to be calc. So the not crown case. So the not crown case is going to use the component that's nth something, and that's going to be the component index. And this is going to use the RGBs 1. Okay. So having done this, we're going to have RGBs 2 for the crown. So this one is going to be crown. So here for the background, I can just set something like, let's get back here. That's too long of a function name for me to remember. Okay, so we're going to have RGB. Like, I really don't get it. I don't get how people remember these long names and they call them descriptive names, but they have so many letters. How do you remember them? Like, okay, so I can just copy paste them because I can never remember them, type them. Okay, so now you see we have brown for the base and like that. And we're going to make a few more changes to this background, but for now, let's fix the rendering issue, because you can see we have those spaces there, so make it 1.01. Okay, so we got rid of those spaces there, but now you can't understand anything from there, so let's add a bit of rotation and shading and stuff like that. And if you want to have a 3D rotation here, we need to set transform style, preserve 3D, and this prevents these faces from being flattened into the plane of their parent when this parent gets a 3D transform. So next step, we're going to have keyframes, rotate Y, 2, transform rotate Y 1 turn. Okay, so it's going to be something like this. Let's get here and set an animation duration. I don't know, this may be too big. Let's make it half of it. I don't even know. I mean, I never know with animations, so animation, rotate around the y-axis. We're going to have that animation duration linear, infinite. Now you can see it rotating. Okay, it's starting to look like something. Now we're going to take this animation part from here, and we're just going to copy paste something very similar here. So okay, like this. Okay, so we're going to change this animation, so it's going to be shade. Okay, this is going to be filter. This is going to be brightness, let's say something like 0.2. This, we're going to make it even out. We're going to make this alternate. We're going to reduce the animation duration to half. And here we're going to have an animation delay, which is going to be the progress times minus the animation duration. So let's see that. Okay, much better. And we can improve this further if we offset the odd and even levels. So we're going to add here plus 0.5 I. Okay, so now you can see it's starting to look like something cool. Okay, so let's set a nicer background here. Let's make it this very dark blue that I've been using a lot lately and I really like, so something like that. Now the next step I'm going to want here is make the top of the tree lighter. So I'm going to do that by using that complementary value here. So let's align stuff nicely first. And then I'm just going to take this part right here, delete that, and I'm going to add not, no, that's going to be, it's not, it's complementary crown progress, right? And it's going to take this, it's going to be plus, and here I'm going to have the crown progress, so the complementary and the crown progress, and this is going to use the last one. So let's see it. Now you can see the top is lighter, so that color changes with the level. Okay, cool. Now let's add a bit of ground underneath the tree. So we're going to do that with a before pseudo element. So before, and let's make this content something. Okay, and we're going to set a padding on it, and we're going to use the relative radius times the unit. Let's set a background, something like this for now. Okay, now the next step is going to be set a transform. Transform translate y minus 50%, something like this. Okay, and then we're going to have a rotate x 90 degrees. Okay, so that looks good. Set the border radius 50%, something like that. Okay, now actually I think we can just increase this to something like 1.5. Okay, now something else I think we can do here is we can set something like a margin top. Let's say we're going to use the number of levels times that relative face height. No, that was a custom property. Times the unit. So, I think that goes way down. So we're going to use something like 0.25. I'm not even sure. So where is it? Okay, so it's even smaller than that. Let's make it something like 0.15. Okay, so something like this. I think it works. So I'm going to leave it at that for now, and I'm going to focus on the background right here. So this is going to be like a radial gradient, and we're going to have the first color, that's brown. We're going to have RGBA, a semi-transparent black, and then we're going to have transparent. So basically something like that. Okay, and we want this up to the radius of that base. So we're going to have a gradient radius. This is going to be calc, the relative in radius, times that base multiplier times the unit. Okay, and we're going to have that here. And then we're going to have this. Plus 1 pixel. And okay. And I think we can do something like, there's not even autocomplete for this. Okay, I think we can actually bump this up a bit more, that alpha. Should do it. If I bring it up to 85, is it too much? I think I can bring it up to 0.8, so, and I'm just going to leave it alone there. Now, something else I want is perspective within there. So for that, I'm going to want to add a scene. So I'm going to put this in a scene element. So everything that's here, I'm going to put into a scene. And let's see if it's the case to move anything onto the scene. So let's see. So we're going to have that scene element, and of course we're going to need to move a few properties on that. So we're going to move this place self-center so it doesn't stretch across the body. We're going to move this okay, this perspective, and we're going to set a perspective. We're also going to move this margin. So let's see, those two values we need to move. So the number of levels, because otherwise the margin is not going to work. So the number of levels we need to move. So style. In general, with custom properties, it's better to set them as low in the tree as possible, because I've seen a lot of people just set them on the root, and that's not exactly the best for performance. So the lower in the tree you can set them, the further away from the root you can set them, the better, so for performance anyway. Now something else, let's set a perspective origin, something like 50%, 20%, and let's see where that takes us. So yeah, this looks a lot better, I think. I think something else we could do is, so for example, with this margin right here, I think we can do something like, just make it a bit more bigger like that. But overall, I'm not going to tweak this any further. I'm just going to leave it like this. I hope you've enjoyed this video, and if you like the work that I'm putting out for over 8 years now, please consider supporting it so I can continue doing this stuff in the future as well. You can do so by being a cool cat and becoming a patron on Patreon. The link is going to be in the description. Or you can get me something off my Amazon wishlist. Again, the links are going to be in the description. Or you can at least share this to show the world what can be done with CSS these days. In any event, thanks for watching, and until next time. Bye!